As many of you know by now, Ontario schools are getting ready to roll out a new revised sex education curriculum later this year. And while there are many who have seen the update of the 17-year-old curriculum as long overdue, there are many who feel the Ministry of Education might have gone a little too far with this new lesson plan. Michael Coren, author, columnist, and our special co-host this week, joins me to delve into this issue a little more. Hey, Michael.
I thought you were going to say specialist in this area, because I'm not. I'm merely a gifted amateur.
You're not a sex specialist. Well, you've been very vocal about this. You've been talking about it quite a bit.
You know, it's just, I cringe when Christianity is represented in the public square, with all due respect, by people who want to scream and shout and haven't done their fundamental primary research. We need to do that.
Yes.
I don't think people involved in this on both sides are evil. We're trying to find a way to raise our kids in the best possible way. I have some issues with the curriculum, but most of it, I mean, I think you've probably read it, most of it is just incredibly boring. It's sort of eat an apple, go and exercise and be nice to people.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing in it.
Well, you made an interesting point. So you have some objections to it. What are some of your objections?
I think it's too interventionist. Look, parents are the primary educators, and most of the people delivering this are teachers. We all know, my wife is a teacher, we all know teachers. They're going to be embarrassed anyway.
Yeah.
Kids do get along. They've found out about sexuality and sex for the longest time. We have procreated fairly well over the centuries. So a lot of it is redundant. It's too much of the state saying this is how you should behave. But most of it, if you read it, you know, it's not as young as we think. People have said 5, 6, and 7. A lot of the stuff is 11, 12, and 13. A lot of it is just observing reality. These things occur, be understanding. So generally, I'm not very concerned, and what I do resent is the attempt, and I know people watching this will say, that Michael Coren's awful, but this idea that Ben Levin, who's going through this infamous trial, that he wrote it. As I'm sure you know, this is pretty standard throughout Europe. I mean, this curriculum is not unique. It was written by dozens of people. Of course he was involved, and the Liberals were very disingenuous, if not dishonest, to deny that. He was involved, but he was one of many. Right. It's not his curriculum, it's a curriculum. Let's read it, let's discuss it. Kathleen Wynne came on my old show that was here, in this very studio. For years, she was a regular panelist. She's a decent woman. Doesn't matter what your politics are. She's not a bad person. She's not trying to corrupt people. Let's sit down and talk about it in a reasonable manner.
And I think you bring up such a good point, discussion. And a lot of my friends, I have a school-aged child, and one that will be entering school very soon. And a lot of my parent friends say the same thing. I would just love to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And, I know that the Liberal government has said that we sent out a survey. 4,000 parents representing 2 million kids in the Ontario School Board is not a way of trying to get parents involved. No. So I think that's part of the concern.
I think that's a valid criticism. Look, if parents are doing their job properly, they have very little time to read a curriculum and comment on it, because we're parenting. It's a full-time profession. So yes, I mean, some of the claims that the Liberal government have made, that there has been consultation, that everyone opposing it is a Conservative Party agent, that's just not true at all. But I think the opposition to it, and I'm not saying I'm part of that, but I think the opposition to it has been hijacked by a fairly small group that does not speak for Christianity in general in any way. And it's made us look rather bad.
Yeah, it's become a lot of fear-mongering, a lot of scary, kind of exaggerating and what shouting, the curriculum has said. Another issue that I know has been a concern is age appropriateness. Yeah. And I think some parents feel that, maybe I agree with sexualization and talking about sex education, but maybe at a certain time, maybe we need to be smart about how we bring up these topics with our kids. What would you say to that?
Well, we do. Of course we do. Now, a lot of it is for kids of 11, 12, and 13. And look, I'm old. I mean, I'm incredibly old. You're young, and as you get older, you tend to view the world through the prism of your younger days, and you're very frightened for your children. That's entirely understandable. And so, I don't know. I see kids today, tattooed and piercings, and I think, my golly. Then I say to myself, what did I look like when I was 15? Absolutely appalling, as I do now. So we've got to be careful in that way. They do understand a great deal at the age of 11, 12, and 13. This argument I've heard, that they're told about the real names of body parts when they're very young. Actually, the argument behind that is that abusers, pedophiles, try to minimize. They'll use very, very sort of cozy and innocuous names for body parts. So it's trying to empower children to say, no, don't touch me there.
Right.
I don't think it's pernicious. I really not believe the motivation for this is in any way pernicious.
But I do agree that parents need to be the primary educators
Which
when
the
it comes
document
to.
does say.
But again, if that is the case, then parents needed to be more involved.
Yes, they did. And Christianity, I mean, the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, evangelicals would agree that parents are the primary educator in every way.
Especially when it comes to sex.
Especially. And there has to be a conversation, and it can be a clumsy one, but there has to be a conversation between parents and children. We're all embarrassed by it. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
And that has to be based on a loving relationship and a trusting one between child and parent. The deeper problem here is that there are a lot of parents who barely see their kids anymore.
Right.
And so there's no conversation, and it can't be based on discipline and authority. It's based on love and respect. I mean, the reason I obey God, try my best to live as God tells me, is not out of fear, it's out of love. Well, that's how a child should relate to their parent. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not as bad as all that. And what does get to me is, this week we're talking about the persecution of Christians, the murder, the mass rape and beheading. We're not being persecuted here. We live in a wonderfully democratic, pluralistic nation. We can disagree with this, but the way to disagree is not to scream and shout, and also, and it has happened, really say abusive things about the Premier of this province and politicians.
Do it in love, do it in respect.
Has to be, has to be.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.